Secure and Not Shaken, that's the title of today's Devo. And last time we talked about being bound in the bundle of the living, a reminder given to David. This time we're looking at another chapter where David's been rescued from his enemies and his response back to God. It's awesome to read about our secure anchor, and it comes from Psalm 30. David praises the Lord for lifting him up and not allowing his enemies to gloat over him. Isn't that the worst, being gloated over by someone else? How low must one feel if that happens? He also says he called on God for help, and God healed him, and he brought him from the realm of the dead and spared him from the pit. The pit of despair is where none of us wants to live, but we will if we pander to the taunts of the enemy, those of self-abasement and fear and hatred and bitterness. All stealers of life, all slippery surfaces on which to try and walk. No climbing takes place when those are in our heart. We only slip backwards. This writer then changes his direction of speech, and he speaks to the people and says, "Sing praises to his faithful people, those in the bundle, because God's anger is short, but his favor lasts forever. Weeping's awful and dark, but in the morning comes rejoicing." And then I love verse 6. It says, "When I felt secure, I said, I will never be shaken." Being anchored or having a foothold, tied and tethered to hope, that's the subject of this entire Devo series. And here this writer says there is a place where he feels secure and it makes him say, "I will never be shaken." Let's pause here. When is a time in your life when you felt the most secure, the most anchored, and the most sure? Is it when you're in the arms of someone you love? Or when money is plentiful or health is good? All of those things make us feel secure, but we know those things are fleeting. We cannot gain a foothold with those things because they can be shaken. But if we read further, David recalls God's rescues and states that that's what's made him feel secure, the nearness of God. The second half of chapter 30, he returns back to talking to God and says how he cried for mercy. He realized there was no gain if he was silenced by falling into the pit, and that dust would be unable to offer praise. He again asked for mercy and for the Lord to be his help. As a bookend to what he said before, he says God turned his wailing into dancing, removed his sackcloth, and clothed him with joy, security. And guess what security brings? A heart that sings and praises, and one that is never silent, one that praises him forever. He said, "When I felt secure, I said, I will never be shaken." That must be the best feeling in life, and I'm pretty sure that feeling doesn't happen unless the things that are unsecure and are shaken, and his nearness is what remains. So let's go back to the image of a mountain climber. Even with the best gear, the perfect wind and weather conditions, even with the fittest and the most trained person on the climb, things can happen. Sudden gust of wind appear, a storm arises, or there's too many areas that don't have footholds for climbing. The human body is finite, so illness or fatigue or bruising or pain could prohibit the climb. And that gear, well, it could fall off the back and plummet to the bottom to be of no use anymore. And what would be left? A mountain climber without foothold or security, about to fall into the pit of despair and death. That's what would be left. Then the climber calls for mercy from the mountain maker. He knows he's about to fall. He could shake his fist and continue to climb ill-equipped or press through the storm without what he needs, or he can call for help. In a place of absolute horror and terror, when all means of survival are stripped, that becomes a place where we can feel secure and say, "I will not be shaken." Those loving arms scoop us up underneath our weak knees and carry us where we need to go. It's never a place of revenge or hate or turmoil. Those places are where we land when we rise a fist at the elements of a climb gone wrong. This chapter is written by a man that knows defeat, loss, sin, mistakes, and fear. And yet this chapter writes of a place of security, being held and rescued, spared and healed. No one can truly sing of the faithfulness of God unless one has truly felt the insecurity of this world. And it's then that we realize how anchored we are in hope and the love of a God that never lets go. I wish, and we all wish, that climbing and that life would never suffer failure and that we could just be footloose and fancy free. But somehow that kind of climb doesn't result in any kind of accomplishment. If a climber came against no obstacles and overcame, no one would be interested in watching that story, that movie, or wonder at that feat. But when all is lost, the pit is below, and we're without hope, and a rescuer comes and holds us and awakens us from death, well, that's a story worth telling and worth praising the one who made it so. When we feel secure, then we can say we will never be shaken.